Ha, 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 ha. Hi everyone, the Ministry of Soundtano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. I'm sorry I don't incorporate Cal in any meaningful ways anymore. God, man, God. And it's time for a review of the brand new, sort of new, it's been out for a little bit now, the new Blanck Mass album, World Eater. This is the latest album from electronic music producer Benjamin John Power. He's better known as one half of the experimental and electronic music duo Fuck Buttons. He is back with his third solo effort over here, his second for the Sacred Bones label. I came away from his last album, 2015's Dumb Flesh, thinking it was decent, but the album didn't leave much of an impression on me, and overall the record just kind of felt like a bit of an artistic outlet for Benjamin for a lot of the things that wouldn't have necessarily made sense on a Fuck Buttons record. But now with it being 4 years since the duo's last album, it seems like some of the ambitious, epic, and very climactic song progressions that typically make it onto their records are kind of seeping into World Eater over here. Because overall this album is sounding way louder, more experimental, almost unpredictable, as the record kicks off with this weird cycling series of very glossy synth loops that sound like something off of a Vaporwave album. Like, not really the sonic tone I would have expected him to take with this record. And even though it's a weird contrast, the song seems to segue very smoothly into the next song, RHESUS Negative. This track for me is beyond words. Favorite track on the record, mostly because there's so much going on with this track. The burning, searing synth leads are fantastic. I love all the layers of distortion, the bustling, busy, relentless beats, all the industrial sound effects. The track just gets thicker and more overwhelming as it continues. Benjamin works through one passage after another on this thing. It's a multifaceted track, and the song stays pretty epic from front to back. Some of the moments on this thing feature these beautiful, glistening synth arpeggios like around the 3-minute mark. And then just at 4:35, things get hyper distorted, and what sounds like these animalistic screams make their way into the mix. Sounds like something that would have been on the last Prurient record or even a Pharmacon album. Like, I would not have expected the sound to turn up on this album, and yet he does it so well. And toward the very end of the track, the music makes this shift into a very dense, maximal electronic composition that is along the lines of that of Dan Deacon. This thing is just a 9-minute monster, and Benjamin does a great job of just densely packing it with some really interesting ideas. Now, unfortunately, the next few tracks kind of suffer from a relative lack of ideas or a much more basic structure, kind of like with a lot of Fuck Buttons material. The issue I kind of have coming away from these songs is that they don't necessarily justify their semi-long lengths. The song Please, stylistically, I think is another subtle nod to the Vaporwave community with kind of how slow and warped the song is, the weird vocal sampling. The singing has this low-pitched, moany quality to it, would probably sound very at home on like a Macintosh Plus album, or even like Daniel Lopatin's Echo Jams. But ultimately, Benjamin comes to his own kinds of conclusions off of these references, off of these ideas, because again, we have a mix here that's so densely packed, so full of sonic experiments and studio trickery. I just would have loved the structure of this thing to be a bit more ambitious, as most of the song is spent with Benjamin shifting back and forth between these two kind of musical passages in the track. Kind of feel the same way about the song The Rat, although this song takes a different musical approach with this very driving, persistent rhythm and these very kooky synth leads that are kind of herky and jerky, remind me of something that would have been on an early Battles album, maybe even an Animal Collective vibe coming off of the rhythm here. The pacing and structure of the song Silent Treatment is a little better. The track kicks off with this very high gloss, loud, large, and in charge wall of synthesizers that are very attention grabbing, eventually settles into these very, very low-key verses with cerebral, hypnotic beats and a very relaxing male vocal that reminds me for some reason of like Crystal Castle's first record. I love how he transitions out of this into these grandiose spiraling passages of synthesizers that are just huge. They're opulent. The finish of this track is super epic, and it's easily one of the album's better songs. The song Minnesota East Force Naked is another surprising twist, because this thing, for all intents and purposes, is like a noise drone piece, which I'm actually very into. Because if there's anything that I think makes this album special, makes this album interesting, it's the sound of this album. Benjamin does some excellent soundcraft on this record. The sounds are so crisp and vivid and loud and in your face and tangible and rough and smooth and shimmering and beautiful and garish and ugly. I love the strange stuttering glitches on this track, the haunting tones, these weird sporadic noisy pieces of percussion that sound like they were lifted off of a Halloween sound effects tape. All of these things assemble into this monolithic block of sonic horror, which intensifies very nicely, eventually mellows out into these beautiful, almost new agey synthesizers that kind of layer over each other. And then eventually at the very end, we kind of get this dreamy, nostalgic beat looping into itself that seems very warped. Another obvious nod to either the sounds of vaporwave or the sounds of chillwave. I don't know what it is about this stuff that makes Benjamin keep coming back and referencing it only for a little bit, or referencing it in just a very, very subtle way. But I guess it does add some personality to the record. Unfortunately, Hive Mind is not really the big finish I was hoping for. It's one of the more easygoing tracks on the entire album. It really does kind of take a while to get going, although I do like its final destination. I do like this album quite a bit. A lot like Dumb Flesh, Benjamin comes through with a real amalgamation of sounds that if you just listed them down on paper, all of these musical influences and styles, they shouldn't make sense on an album, but yet Benjamin's very unique and very distinct approach to designing sounds on this record somehow pulls it all together into a really cohesive album, much more cohesive than his previous record, I think. And even the songs that I wasn't totally in love with did have very powerful moments within them. Compositionally, structurally, I think the album did leave a little bit to be desired on a handful of tracks, but for the most part, this is a really interesting and ambitious record for Benjamin, and I think an improvement on what he's been doing. I'm feeling a light to decent 7 on this album. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe, and please don't die, because then you can't watch more of my videos. Speaking of which, other videos next to my head that you should check out. Subscription to the channel button too, official website as well. And have a nice day.